I was doing some speaking training recently and somebody asked me a very interesting question. They said, Duncan, how do you develop speeches? What's your system? So I thought, that's a great question. I'll answer that with a video. So this is my speech development system. It's not necessarily the most systematic thing, but broadly speaking, this is what I do when I've got a speech coming up. So first and foremost, the first thing to remember is I don't write a lot of stuff down. I don't make notes. I definitely don't write out all of my speech. I think that's a big mistake because when you start writing stuff, it turns into an essay. And essays are great, but you write things in the form of an essay in a completely different way to the way you speak. So I don't develop my speeches by writing, I develop them by speaking. And it falls into three main sections: the idea, the development, and the practice. So let's have a look at those three sections. The idea. So what do I do when I know I've got a speech coming up or when I want to start developing a speech? What I do is I think about the purpose of the speech. I think about what I'm trying to achieve. I think about what do I want the audience to do, really? What do I want them to think differently? How do I want them to behave differently? What different results do I want them to get? That's where I start with my speech. The effect it's going to have on the audience. That's the main thing. And then I start to think about the structure. So there's different ways of structuring a speech. This often becomes apparent when I've worked out what I'm trying to do, which is the right structure to use. I wrote an article about speech structures recently. I'll put a link to it down there so you can have a look at that. But there's lots of different ways of structuring speeches. So think about that, and I'll think about the main points that I'm trying to get across. So nothing more than that, just what I'm trying to achieve, what structure I'm going to use, what are my main points. That's just the idea that I develop. Then I'll probably leave it for a bit, and then I'll move to the next section, which is development. So like I say, I don't develop things by writing them down. I develop them by talking to myself. I try not to do this in public, but sometimes, I just get a bit carried away. That's why mobile phones are great. You can just stick them up against your ear and practice your speech whilst you're walking down the street. Generally, I do it in my office or in my bedroom or, when I'm doing the washing up. And I'll just talk and I'll think about what main point I want to say and I'll think about the ways I can explain it. And I'll just start talking and things will come and some of it will be rubbish, some of it will be good. And I might make a few notes, but they aren't notes that I'm ever really going to check back. They're notes that I make that help me remember things. And then I'll leave a bit of time. And I think time is the most important thing you can have when you're developing your speech. Sometimes it's the points where you're not thinking about it, when you're not involved with it, that you actually do your best work. So I will develop a bit of a speech and then I'll leave it for a bit and I'll come back to it and all of a sudden I'll have a new fresh look at it. I'll have come up with some new ideas. It just really helps. So I develop it for a bit by speaking, then I think about it by not thinking about it, then I develop it some more by speaking. And I might again make some notes, but not really long notes, just little ideas. Maybe a key line. If I come up with a nice line like give the people precedence or community is the new charity, two of my favourite lines. Those ones, I'd write those down and then I'll make sure I say those because I think they're zingers. So once I've developed it, I move into the practice phase, and practice is really important. So there's three phases to the way I practice. Firstly, I practice to make myself familiar with the speech. So I practice it to make sure I can say it without really thinking about it, because that's important. So that's my first bit of practice, just to familiarise myself with it. Then the second phase of practice will be for blocking, which is an expression that actors and artists use to mean movement. So I'll think about the points where I'm going to move. I'll think about what I'm going to do with my hands. I'll think about the extra elements that you can put on top of it, vocal variety, movement, that sort of thing. I'll do that in the second phase of practicing. And then my final phase of practicing will be for somebody else. I am a member of several speakers clubs and the Professional Speaking Association, and I have lots of people who will listen to my speeches as they're developing, which really helps me. They tend to tell me what they liked. I tend to ask them for very specific things that they liked. What exactly did you like? Not, it was great, Duncan. And then I also ask them to give me some feedback, things they think I could improve. And you'd be surprised. I've met some people who say, oh, Duncan, you know, you're such an experienced speaker. How could I ever help you? And then they proceed to give you some amazing little details that really help your speech. So that's the final and perhaps the most important phase of practicing your speech, is getting some feedback on it. So that's my system, if you like, for developing it. I come up with an idea, I think about what I'm trying to achieve, I develop the speech by speaking, thinking and speaking some more, and then I practice the speech, first for familiarity, then for blocking, and then finally for feedback. So that's my little system. If you've got a system, I'd love to hear about it. You can email me at info@theciviccoach.com, or if you've got a question about public speaking or about anything else that I do, I'd be really interested in hearing from you, and I'll record you a little video like this. So my name's Duncan Baskerville Brown. I'm the Civic Coach. Thank you very much.